all of us love watching films, and India makes the most number of films every year in different languages, and we have like different set of industries that makes films. But what happens to the films that were made 20, 30, 40 years ago? Where are they saved? Where are they preserved? We, of course, have a national archive that stores these films, but the Film Heritage Foundation of India, which is a non-profit organization, also actively works to preserve films, especially films across languages, across communities, and they try to restore them. They don't just preserve them, they try to restore them. To give you a bit of context, recently a show called Jubilee was released where they show these canisters where all the film reels are stored. So I'm here at the International Center where they're holding a 10-day summer workshop for people, enthusiasts, students who want to learn more about filmmaking and film preservation. So we're going to find out more in this video. What does these process entail? What happens in archiving? What is the process? What are chemicals used? How are they stored? We'll also learn what happens when a disaster strikes. How are you going to save them? What happens when 40 years later or today when I'm standing here, we are hearing terms like IMAX, we're hearing terms like 70 What do these mean? So all of this and more we are going to find out in this video.
You're so busy in making your next film, you never think about preservation, you never think about restoration, you never think about heritage. And many times, unlike some of the great American directors, the good thing about these directors are that they're not only great filmmakers, but they're big advocates about film preservation and film restoration. We don't have that in India. So I came back to Bombay, and I remember going to meet P.K. Nair in Pune and having a conversation with him, and that led to my making a film called Celluloid Man, which I never thought I'll make a film on film preservation, but it was, I just thought I'll shoot some footage, I'll put it out to the public, and people will get to know a little bit more about what's really happening. But I think Celluloid Man was such an important journey for me because it was not about the film, it was about my journey, it was about the process. And the fact that I've traveled all over India, finding lost films, finding films which don't exist, finding what we need to do, uh, really made me think of starting something. Something, many times you do a cause, but you really don't go beyond that. You think you've supported a certain thing, but it's good enough. But in this case, Mrs. Bachchan came to me and said, "Why don't you set up a foundation which is very similar to what Scorsese did?" And then Mr. Bachchan came as a brand ambassador, and then we had an advisory board of Shyam Benegal, Kumar Shahani, Girish Kasarwali, Kamal Hassan, Gulzar Saab, and slowly the foundation came to a reality. But even that time, I did not realize that the mammoth task we're going to undertake, because people didn't even know about film preservation. They had no idea what film preservation is. So it was in 2014 when we set up the Film Heritage Foundation. And the primary goal of the foundation was that we need to preserve, we need to find, and we need to restore. But also, the educational aspect was a large part of our agenda, that we wanted to uh, reach out to young kids or reach out to schools and reach out to every young person in this country and talk about showing classic films, talk about heritage, basically also move them out of the mobile culture and sort of get them to understand that preservation doesn't just mean cinema, or it doesn't mean cinema from Bombay. It means films all through, and also the audiovisual heritage. It could mean a documentary film, it could mean a freedom movement film, sports film. We just now did a whole festival of Olympic.
At present, Odisha haven't any film archives, but there is a good collection of films. So every year around 20 to 100 films are produced at Odisha. So at present around more than thousands films are there who are in danger conditions. So this is my third session what I attend in this conservation classes. Earlier I attended in 2018 at Calcutta and in 2000 in Hyderabad. Actually, people haven't an aware about the archives. Actually, archives is a very fascinated things. Okay, so and once people who comes to the archives, they fall in love and they don't want to leave that. So that is the my first aim for which I come join this archival workshops. So my main motto is to learn how to identify the films, and these are the techniques and how digitize for the preservation and the preserving of the original can. Actually, if you really think about the history of the film, that the first is the your camera negative, and that is the duplicating negative positive. These are the different stage of the your film, and primarily the preservation of film is very important. Its content, the heritage, as the history of the particular region. Okay, so that's why, and you know, film are as a chemical object, so they are decaying if it not kept in proper condition, and gradually lot of films are in not available that in original negative. Particularly in Odisha, the first film which was made in 1938, that's Sita Vivaho. That is a black and white film, but unfortunately that film we are lost. Neither a single copy of in any form, like in negative or positive or in DVD form. We are only have in history that Sita Vivaho is the first Odia film of the Odisha. So that is the great shock to our community, that if we start this preservation wars earlier, then we may get back that copy also.
Traditionally, museums that deal with objects and things should have a good disaster plan and be well prepared, but archives are always struggling. Film and video archives, audio-visual archives are always struggling with resources, with expertise and so on, and so things like disaster management tend to get pushed to one side and forgotten about. So what I'm trying to do is to remind people that a lot of good disaster planning is really just about good collection care, because all the things you do to look after collections properly will also help in the event of an impending disaster. But should a disaster happen, you have to be prepared to deal with the results.
We're also going to learn from experts, instructors who are giving classes here on different topics, and also from the person whose brainchild is this organization. And we are also going to talk to students who are part of this, and we'll learn from them why did they take up this course and what have they learned in all of the days that they have been here.
I mean, India has such a great, rich history of cinema. Probably, if you really think about it, it's right with America in terms of influence. The number of people that are influenced by those films is, you know, the population that sees these films, the interest of the films. What seems to be missing, and I'm certainly no expert on Indian cinema, is that it reminds me almost of the silent era when film was really considered almost a disposable commodity. You would make a film, you would show it, and then it was old and then nobody cared about it anymore because we were making new ones. And that strikes me as somewhere along the line, actually in the 50s in America, where studios figured out that these films and these assets had value beyond their original theatrical release. And that was 50s because that's when they started being able to show them on television. It's like, oh, there's a new audience for these films. And they started saving them and they started presenting them on television. They started being able to generate money for the studios again. But here, and it's my impression, and again, I'm no expert, but it seems that here the films are sort of still in the disposable commodity category of, there's not really the thought that we want to keep this film around because we want to show it again 50 years from now, or we want audiences in the future to see it. It's like, we've made the film, we've seen it, we've shown it to people, it's sort of, it's fulfilled its useful commercial life, and we move on. And I think that's maybe my impression of why this efforts like this are so important because you need to create that mindset that isn't really taken hold yet. And it really hasn't taken hold in many places. I mean, most Americans don't think about film preservation. Nobody anywhere thinks about it. It's our job to think about it and to hopefully get other people to think about it.
Everything that's involved in preserving this. And one of the interesting part is that we receive, the instructors are from major archives around the world, so the BFI, which is absolutely fantastic. And so also very interesting for us. They're fantastic because you see what is possible when all the stars are aligned for archiving. Interesting also for us because the stars are not aligned for us for archiving our past. We don't have the infrastructure, our government doesn't have the money, the private sector is not interested, hardly anybody is interested. And so the premises on which the Western archives are built are completely different from ours. Although we have the same objective, but our objective conditions are different. And so it creates a very interesting conundrum whereby, so we obviously pull out as much as we can for our conditions, but we know that they don't have answers to many of our problems. We know that. And so one of the challenges to see for us to develop, first of all, answers to our own problematic, but also to see how our own problematic could also be used to change the way film archiving is done generally, right? Because we come from a position of scarcity. We come from climatological conditions that are not of the north. So there's no snow in most of our countries. It's hot, it's humid or dry. It's tough. 45. We have places in Africa where you're at 52 degrees in the sun. And so on. So our question is, how do you preserve cinema at 52 degrees in the sun? Nobody has an answer to that. With no means, that is to be precise. They don't have an answer to that right now. And
But
so
the beginning.
this exactly. So these are something that we are also interested in terms of our contribution to this global world of film archiving, because I think personally that many of the questions of film archiving were developed based on the premises of the global north, simply. And that the second century of film preservation will have to put at its center the problems of the...
This 10-day workshop actually aims to also provide people who have interest in not just filmmaking but film preservation a glimpse into what holds in the future of preserving film, especially when you have entered a digital era. One of the instructors here was telling how often iconic films that you may have heard of have been discarded. There are also stories done about how these original cuts, films have often been found in random places because we don't have a robust system of preserving films. People are still yet to know we don't have enough experts who can handle this job. And in a country where we make the most amount of films, it is essential that we preserve things which have been made ages ago so that we can continue watching and rewatching them even 20, 30, 50 years from now. To watch more ground reports like this, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and also follow us on our social media handles. This is Tina Das with Suraj Singh Bisht.